I can only imagine living in the US right now. My own government restricts me from having access to the greatest drones, the greatest cars. That's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
I thought this is the land of the free.
Yeah.
And now I can't have, I have to go through like illegal channels through Canada or Mexico to get these things. And even still, then you can't register the car and you can't register the drone with the FAA. And so it's just and that's recent. That's like in the last 3 years. It's very strange. And I think that has lasting consequences of the US is willing to deprive its own citizens of the best stuff.
Welcome to Manifold. We're talking to you from Shenzhen, China. I am here with my man, Taylor Ogan, the founder and CEO of Snowbull Capital. Taylor, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. And great to meet you in person.
You know, it's funny, when we met, I sort of forgot that we had never met in person because I feel like I kind of know you pretty well. Your previous episode on the show was very well received. People loved that episode and opened up a lot of people's eyes. And to use the current Silicon Valley speak, you showed like very, very strong agentic ability to like just uproot your fund and come here. And now you've been living in Shenzhen for how long?
3 years.
3 years. And in our conversation, we just had an amazing 90-minute conversation before we started taping the episode. It's like, you know, like every square meter of this place, the fastest way to get to Hong Kong airport by ferry. It's amazing. Like it's clear that you're a student of this city.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best city to be a student of. And it's so big that I'll never be able to master even one district. I mean, we're talking about a place that's three times the size of Manhattan, same with the population, and just the rate of growth for every single thing. I mean, there's going to be a new mall open next week that I haven't even heard about. There's going to be a new park. I think last year they added 150 parks. It's probably as much as Manhattan has.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's always evolving.
Now is it about 20 million people, like depending on how you define?
24 if you include the migrant population.
Okay.
But yeah, the registered population is quite a bit lower. That's the WHOCO.
Yeah.
But yeah, the actual people living here is 24 million.
So it's 20 plus million megacity, but right across the border from Hong Kong, which is itself one of the major cosmopolitan cities. But then something most Westerners don't realize is we're embedded in something called the Pearl River Delta, which is other monster cities and huge manufacturing infrastructure. And the goal of the local governments around here is to integrate all of this very, very tightly. So they have this vision of the Pearl River Delta region being one of the major regions in the world. And, you know, you could think of it as something with the population of like Germany or something like that, but at a same level of development and actually leading the world in a lot of key technologies.
They're calling it the Greater Bay Area. And basically it's connecting Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. Already it's 14-minute bullet train from Shenzhen to Hong Kong. And that's CBD to CBD. And in a few years, they'll connect by train, Wuhan, and already Guangzhou, it's 32 minutes by high-speed train. So when I go to Hong Kong, like let's just say for lunch, I think of it as just taking the metro. It's even in the same station.
Yeah.
It's a lot faster.
Yeah, it's a good point. So CBD for American Central Business District, we don't always use that terminology. Sure. But yeah, the high-speed trains are so convenient that you can think of it as getting on the metro. And it's a similar kind of ride time. You might ride the metro 30 minutes in a big city. But yeah, you get on a high-speed train and you're in actually another mega city. That's how crazy it is. And these are all mega cities which are built on high tech and advanced manufacturing. So everything is pretty much made here.
So this region is really important for the country, but also for Shenzhen, because in the past, Shenzhen was the weakest part of this region. Now it's arguably the strongest. So even Hong Kong, they need Shenzhen. Hong Kong doesn't have any manufacturing. It doesn't really have that much free land that they could build on. Shenzhen kind of possesses everything. It is kind of awkward for some of these other mayors and even residents of these cities because they don't live in Shenzhen. They're just connected to it very conveniently. So they still have to go back to their home at night. If you look at a map of the world at night, this part of the world just glows more than any other. So yeah, it'll be the biggest region, and it really is hard to conceptualize how big this region is, how populous it is, because there just isn't another example. So yeah, it's going to be the first of its kind, and it's awesome to be here. So like I said, I'll never become an expert on any aspect of it because now it's just linked to these other mega cities. So,
but I can tell, Taylor, that you're very curious and you have an analytic mind for this stuff, because I know actual Chinese people who are here, and if I ask them general questions about Shenzhen, they cannot answer those questions as well as you can. So, because you're actually thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just super curious. I think because I wasn't born here, I still kind of feel like an outsider, a guest, and there's no end date though. I'm always super curious. I think in the last year, my average steps per day was 23,000.
Wow.
And a lot of my friends, because on WeChat, you can see what your friends are stepping. I think most of my friends get maybe 2,000 a day. Not having a car, I could have a car, but Didi is so abundant, and robotaxis now, and the metro, it's really easy to get anywhere you want to go. So you see something on Xiaohongshu even, you can just do it. You don't have to plan it for 3 weekends from now. So yeah, it's for anyone super curious, I would say the best place in the whole world, especially if you like tech.
Definitely if you're visiting China, obviously Shanghai, Beijing are sort of two classic places people tend to go to. But I would definitely, if you have it, time in your itinerary, spend some time in Shenzhen. People have heard me say this before in terms of my biography, but in the early 90s, I came to Hong Kong to visit. I was in Japan for a physics conference, but I stopped in Hong Kong. I think I had a former girlfriend that lived there, and I had a little spare time, and I was asking her what I should do. And like at the time, what everybody said was, oh, you should go to Guilin, which is this very picturesque city with these huge limestone mountains with weird shapes. And it's the kind of thing you see in like Chinese paintings. I still to this day have not been there, but
you have to go.
It's supposed to be, one of the most physically stunning and beautiful locations in the world. But I said to her, you know what? I don't want to go to Guilin. I want to see the special economic zone, the SEZ. Yeah. So I came here to Shenzhen when there was literally nothing here. The streets were mud. They were putting up, high rises, but there were no sidewalks. It was the most shocking thing. We was in a tour bus. Tour bus kept getting stuck in traffic. The traffic was not just other cars, but it was like construction vehicles and bicycles and just insane. We stopped at a state-run sort of tourist store that was part of the tour. And in talking to the people who staffed that store, it was sort of like people now would think about North Korea, in the sense that the people working in that store who were employees of the state, they didn't really know what customer service was. They didn't really even know what like a business environment was. It was like dealing with a completely alien culture, and it was still in evidence, even as like thousands and thousands of people were streaming in to like build, like staff the first factories that were making like cheap rubber goods and shoes. I saw that early 90s. So that was 30 years ago. And now, I could be anywhere. I could be in Manhattan. Taylor and I are looking out at what is this area that we're looking out on?
Well, so Shenzhen is quite unique. It's super long and skinny. It's kind of like Manhattan. And so we are looking at basically the whole city skyline. It's a great view, actually.
Yeah, we're on the 22nd floor of the building where I'm staying. And we've got a great view of the bay and some super tall, like, is that the number 6 tallest building in the world?
Yeah.
Okay.
Literally, it's in the clouds right now.
Yeah.
And also Hong Kong right there.
Yeah. Oh, that's Hong Kong. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of what makes the city so unique. It has 2 deep water ports on either side of it, and its proximity to Hong Kong. It's actually very flat land as well. It's shocking that no one built anything here until Deng Xiaoping decided.
Right.
Because it's perfect for what it is now.
Yeah.
So it's also why it's kind of working out for it. But yeah, I mean, that's crazy that, the human brain probably can't process.
It's been basically one generation. So one generation of humans, lived during that time, and this amount of change. I just don't think anywhere else in the world you could imagine this level of change in 30 years.
Not. Yeah. And my parents actually, they came in the early 90s, and I asked them, I wasn't even born yet, but I asked them, when you looked around and saw exactly what you saw, could you ever imagine that your child would live here And I think my dad said, yeah, no, I could see it. Yeah, right.
Oh, come on.
There's no way. But isn't that crazy that
your child would live here in on the 40th floor of some ultra luxury building with a flat panel TV and,
right.
And like some AI controller for all the gadgets in the,
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
But that's the same way that all of these Chinese feel. And they're, these people, no one until now is really from Shenzhen. And so you have these people who literally were factory workers who are now multimillionaires just because they came here before everyone else. Also, I think something that people don't talk about, it happens in other cities, but not the same effect. It's these urban villages. There were pockets in Shenzhen where people had lived for hundreds of years. It was a walled village, basically. Sometimes only like 30 people, usually kind of one family clan. And now those have existed. There's still a few left. And now if a property developer wants to build there, they have to buy them out.
Yeah.
But it's not, they don't just buy them out with a ton of money. I can name 6 in Shenzhen that every single person in that village is a millionaire. There are 2 where they minted, it's estimated 15 billionaires.
Wow.
In one. And we're talking USD billionaires.
Wow.
So yeah, these people who literally, like, it was their land, and it's not just the money though. They actually are given, it's part of the negotiation, and the negotiation takes years, and it's all on public display, and people actually come out to watch it. Let's say you had 150 square meters in the urban village. They have to have at least 150 square meters in whatever they build on top of it. And usually there's a negotiation where they have at least typically 4 to up to, in one case, 20 units on top of what they were paid, and they get to rent that out.
Wow.
And so some of these people actually came after 1980, and they were just factory workers, and they rented these apartments. They weren't even apartments. I mean, they were shacks. And then they eventually bought one of them. So they also are kind of owed this. That alone, probably, I think the estimate in the city is there are about 30 billionaires that are billionaires from that. And so just imagine in their lifetime. I mean, it's crazy. Some of these people didn't even have shoes. This one group of people that lived on an island kind of in between here and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And they literally did not have shoes. They would come on land, and because they're forced to, because the island, the military wanted it. And so they hated being on land. They want to stay on their island. They didn't speak Mandarin. They didn't have form of currency. And now some of them are billionaires. And they're still alive. Like, this is not that long ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah. It's definitely a unique story. What happened here within a 50-kilometer radius of where we are is just insane. It's probably very few cases anything like it ever in the history of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it's been studied. There is no other case.
Yeah.
And everyone always asks me, what's the next Shenzhen?
Yeah.
Shut up. It's not possible. Like, so many things went right. They got very lucky, I will say, but it also was very strategic planning. This is probably a Chinese view. I don't think I've heard it from a non-Chinese, but some say that Deng Xiaoping is maybe the smartest human to ever live. And,
or at least maybe like the biggest positive impact.
Yeah.
Like if you integrate over like 1 billion people and
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe he was really ambitious, or maybe he saw it exactly like it is. But I can tell you, even the planning of Shenzhen, where we are right now, that was not part of the original plan.
Yeah.
They did not plan for this.
Yeah. This part of Shenzhen, because I used to come here a lot 15 years ago when I worked with BGI, I don't think I've ever really been in this area very much. So yeah.
Yeah. Now the GDP for this district, Nanshan, it's now the largest in China.
Wow.
And it just surpassed some countries. So yeah, this is where all the big names now at least have a huge presence, maybe not their exact headquarters.
Yeah.
This is where all the innovation is happening. This is the district where you will see drone delivery. We can look out the window and spot a few robo-taxis. Yeah, this is all of the innovation is being crammed into this one district, especially. And then the other districts are kind of known for other things like low altitude economy.
Yeah.
This is just the culmination of innovation. So anyone who wants to come to Shenzhen, totally stay in Nanshan. And that's the other thing. A lot of people come here, they don't stay here because maybe they used to come and they used to stay in Lobu, which is way over there.
Yeah. That's where I used to go.
Yeah. And that is like a third world country.
Yeah, it's a dump compared to this place. Yeah.
So this is where everything's happening.
So was it last summer? So I won't say his name, but a pretty famous old school venture capitalist from Silicon Valley who, was a billionaire type guy. If I said his name, everyone who's in like my generation of founders would all know who he is. Wanted to come to China and wanted to see some real stuff, real shit, as they say. And so I hooked him up with Taylor, and Taylor got him a tour of, I won't say the name of the EV company, but one of the major EV companies here. You were able to give the guy a tour, let him test drive some of the top cars. Yep. And I assume he was a little bit blown away by the manufacturing capability. I guess he also toured Xiaomi when he was here.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, people can definitely read between the lines. But yeah, and he met with the number 2 at BYD with lunch. And it's actually funny. Everyone at BYD, they said, yeah, a lot of people reach out and they say, can you get me a tour of this? And I mean, you don't want to just be a tour guy for everyone. But yeah, this person was worth it. I was telling the company that, this guy is coming. And I, of course, told them his name. No one had heard of him.
Yeah.
And it was only because someone who was in one of these group messages went to school in the US, and their professor, they made them read this person's blog.
Yeah.
And so they knew all about him. And they said, you have to, bring out everything for him. So that actually helped more than even myself. But yeah, the thing is, a lot of people on their China tour don't come to Shenzhen.
Yeah.
And like very famous people.
Yeah.
And Jamie Dimon, all of these guys, the circuit is Beijing and Shanghai, and maybe they'll go to Hong Kong, or maybe they'll go to even Guangzhou. They still do not come here.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But I was just in Silicon Valley. So I spent January and February in San Francisco, Berkeley, and mainly focused on AI stuff. I don't know if you saw the last couple episodes. They're very, very like in the weeds about AI doomers and dreamers in the Bay Area right now. But one of the things that was interesting is there are a lot of Silicon Valley founders and entrepreneurs who want to take tours where they come to Shenzhen and they see factories and they talk to people about, hey, if I wanted to source this board here, how would it go? And so that is a real thing. So people, at least in that category, really get that Shenzhen is a place that, it's funny because if I'm talking in English, I'd say Shenzhen, but that's not the actual Chinese pronunciation. They realize that this is the place that you have to get a look at.
Yeah, they come through and reach out to me. They're engineers.
Yeah.
So if they're an engineer,
right, exactly,
they know Shenzhen.
Yes.
If they're not an engineer, probably have never heard of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, actually, I just had one guy come through who, well, it's not even come through. He opened an office, a very large US company that is in manufacturing. Well, they manufacture as well, a 3D printing company. And the founder is a super smart engineer, MIT. And he said he just opened an office here. And amid the political pushback and everything, he said, I've been coming to this city for so long, and their machines are made here. Why hide that? Like, let's just embrace it. So that shift kind of is happening. A lot of these old Apple guys who used to come here, who no longer come here, they are checking back in with what's going on here.
So one of the stories you told me, and I'm going to try to tell it in a way that doesn't, give out too much information. A lot of Americans, they understand Chinese is a big manufacturing power and, rising up the value added chain in technology, but it's a little hard for them to square it with the idea that it's this communist country, it's authoritarian. There's a guy called Xi Jinping. And so the way that an individual CEO of a public company that's shipping billions of dollars of, say, devices around the world that ordinary people are using, like DJI or BYD or any of these companies, I think it's hard for Americans to understand what the relationship is between the people who run these, leading tech companies and the central government. And one model, which, people who are more on the NatSec side and are more paranoid about China, they have this model that if you allow a BYD into your country and it's got little cameras on it and LiDAR, and if it comes near a US military base, it's obviously mapping everything on that base, and every bit of information that goes through TikTok or goes through the BYD computer in your car, it goes right to the CCP or CPC, and they get a hold of it. And so, but you were just telling me a story about a key decision of an EV CEO here to go out and start selling cars in a foreign country like Brazil or the United States or Canada. And so you were telling me about to what extent that decision had to be cleared with the political side in China. And I was kind of amazed at the way you described it, but don't give away anything that you shouldn't, but just try to speak to the point of what it is like to operate here in China as a CEO.
So, I mean, I ask founders, because you can't get this answer from anyone who is not the head of the company, even the number two. This is not in their wheelhouse. But I have been going around as the curious person I am, just straight up asking them, did you have to get permission for X, Y, Z? And I just am fascinated how the government ties into industry here. And because it has serious implications for me and my company. And I'm just curious because it is this like kind of mysterious, regime.
Yeah.
And
well, it is basically getting to the how does we're looking out the window at this amazing country. How does it work? Like we know how America works, right? But any other particular countries, like, well, how do things work here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so curious. So I just ask them very charged questions, I would say. And I am so surprised more often than not and this is the Shenzhen effect to a large extent, where it is a carve out of China. If we were in Beijing, I'm always told that, we can do X, Y, Z here, but probably we wouldn't even try it in Beijing. Maybe that's changing. Like they could get away with more things, but they just don't want to have that risk. Here, though, they're all about taking risk. And so basically, I'm fascinated by how little government oversight or even interactions there are with some really, really huge decisions, and even the timing of things. And that being said, when it has to do with, coordination with the government, like APEC is coming up and Shenzhen is going to be a host, and we can talk about that later. But that is obviously directly with the government. So they have their hand in everything, but as a country should, So it just, I don't know how exactly to describe it. It just makes a lot of sense in how things actually operate behind the scenes here.
So, but I think your point was you gave me a couple of anecdotes in which pretty key decisions were made, and the CEO basically, or the leadership team made those decisions without any consultation from Beijing.
Yes.
And in a way, like for an outsider, even for someone who's got a sophisticated view of how things work here, they might think, wow, that seems a little risky because the government might have told them, no, that was not a good idea. It goes against some policy or strategy that we have. I think one we can talk really specifically about, because it happened some time ago, is you were telling me that when Gina Raimondo was here, Gina Raimondo was a commerce secretary under Biden, and it was in that administration where they completely cut off Huawei from the advanced chips, say Qualcomm, that they had been using in their phones. And that was a big problem for Huawei. And so Huawei kind of went into they were a bit dormant. They went from being, I think, either number one or very close to number one in global cell phone sales to not really be able to sell product until they could basically re-engineer their phones. They had their own domestically made 7-nanometer CPU for the new phone, and they launched, it was the Mate 60. Is that right?
Mate 60, yeah.
So when Gina Raimondo happened to be here, they launched the Mate 60.
And it was a huge surprise. No, it did not.
Without any warning. Yeah, no leaf.
Chips development was like a total surprise.
Yeah.
Everything.
So they launched this phone. And so people might remember this it's a few years ago. So maybe it's not that fresh in your memory. But at the time, it was a big shock. Now everybody takes it in stride. But at the time, it's oh, Huawei was dead. But now they're shipping a world-class phone with a, slightly less than world-class chip. But it was still very surprising they could do it. 7-nanometer processor. What Taylor told me is that the Huawei people have told him that they did not get approval from the government to launch it when Gina Raimondo was here, because everybody in the world who follows geopolitics, US-China competition, tech competition, thought, hey, this is them giving the finger to Gina and to the US Commerce Department and US trade sanctions, trade barriers. And apparently it was, maybe the company was thinking that, but it wasn't the government that was doing that. And they didn't even get approval from the government to do it. So
it is crazy, because I just expected that they had to at least, a lot of people think that was the government's decision in the first place. I thought maybe that's possible, but at least they had to get this cleared because this is truly like a political event. And they are very proud that they did not have to. And the reason that they did it when she was here is because they see the US directly of course, it cut them off. And so they wanted to get back. And this was their way to bite back. So it's the same thing with like Xiaomi countersuing to get off of the entity list in the US. That they just do that stuff. You think it's the government because you hear about the Communist Party and everything. That's just not how it works in practice. The worst people, though, who have opinions on these things are the ones who used to do business in China. Because I will say, I wasn't doing business in China, but I've heard plenty of stories that, yes, that these things used to happen. IP theft, just straight copying from, their schematics. And these kinds of things did happen. The government, you couldn't even get a tour of Shenzhen like in the 80s unless you were with the government if you were a foreigner. So
when I came here, it was the first time you could just come as a foreigner and look at it. That was the very first moment when you could. Like a few years before that, you couldn't even come here to look at it.
Yeah, when my parents came, they had to be with the government. And that's how people think of China today. The people who used to do business here or used to come here. And they are the worst offenders.
Yeah, they have an out-of-date, sort of backward-looking view of the situation.
They just assume how could all of this have been so controlled back then, and it's not now. Well, it just is not now.
Yeah.
So it really is fascinating and still surprises me. But again, Shenzhen is also an enigma.
At the time when that whole incident happened with the Mate 60 launch, even people who are China experts or have done business here, there was this wasn't the main point people were debating, but there was a lot of back and forth discussion where people said, oh, they must have had approval from the government to do this. And, apparently they didn't.
Same thing with DeepSeek.
Yeah.
People thought that had to be it. And it's just not true. And that really helps shape my worldview of China, I would say, because it's just not, they just do stuff.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm sure if the Mate 60 launched and it did have stolen technology or something and it got really ugly, then maybe Huawei would get in trouble from the government. That still is certainly possible. They're now doing a lot of things that they wouldn't previously do. And I think that's also a lot of young engineers are now realizing this, and they are coming, or they're just not leaving China to start their companies or to work at these big companies because they now can do this. There used to be NetEase used to have a huge censorship team. And now their censorship, they still have one. You can't, post about the raw footage of a school shooting or something, but it's not the censorship that they used to have. And so now they have maybe two people. And a lot of it's also AI. But yeah, some of the stuff, has changed just fundamentally on the business side. And engineers do not like to be restricted. And I think that's partially the reason of why this has changed so much, especially just in business, is because the country saw that we can't be this restricted. And our best engineers no longer work for the party. They're, just ordinary citizens.
Yeah.
So that is probably partially why. But the point is that it's just not how it used to be. And it's terribly misunderstood.
Yeah, I think on one extreme, especially among the national security people or whatever, or people who are just very anti-China or paranoid, they still think every decision has to pass Xi Jinping's desk. That's how authoritarian it is. But then you look at this is one of the most complex economies in the world, and there's no way that things could move forward if that were true. There has to be a lot of decentralized decision-making where the government is not playing a role in it at all. And I think that turns out to be the case.
Yeah, and even right now, DJI is in America. If you go to their website, try to add to your cart any DJI product, it says out of stock. Now, they're not technically, they could sell some of these things in the US. That's DJI biting back and saying, you know what, you guys don't get to have the latest stuff. And that's something, and by the way, you should definitely fill your suitcase with DJI things and other things that are banned. But that is, as an American, it is a very weird feeling, I will say, even living here. But I can only imagine living in the US right now, where my own government restricts me from having access to the greatest drones, the greatest cars. That's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
I thought this is the land of the free.
Yeah.
And now I can't have, I have to go through illegal channels through Canada or Mexico to get these things. And even still, then you can't register the car and you can't register the drone with the FAA. And so it's just and that's recent. That's like in the last 3 years. It's very strange. And I think that has lasting consequences of the US is willing to deprive its own citizens of the best stuff.
Yeah.
That may be a trend. Yeah. And if it's not, at least people will see that is the reach that the US government has. We're not talking about the Chinese government. And again, the reaction from private Chinese companies is to do this themselves. So that as well is not from the government. It's not the government saying, DJI, you cannot sell, even though you're technically not fully banned yet, but in the meantime, you can't sell. No, it's just them saying, all right, you don't get to have it then. So it's changing.
So speaking of like advanced stuff that's here that maybe we won't be able to have in the US, let's talk about this crazy ZTE phone that you showed me. So you have a prototype phone. It's made by ZTE, which is a major cell phone manufacturer in China. This particular phone has built in, very highly integrated in the operating system, AI, and the AI is Doubao, is that correct?
Yes.
And who trains that model?
But that's ByteDance.
Right. So it's ByteDance, which people in the US know it as the parent company of TikTok. But what many people don't realize is that it's one of the leading AI companies. And so now ZTE has partnered with them to produce a phone that has the kind of internal agentic capabilities on the phone that really are like what everybody in the Valley has been going crazy about with OpenClaw. So for those of you who are not aware of this, very recently, the capabilities of agents became strong enough, and someone wrote a nice open source kind of platform for this so that you can buy a Mac Mini and let these AI agents go crazy, controlling everything on the computer, and it can handle your email and WhatsApp messages. You can interact with the agents and just like send them a WhatsApp message to like, oh, research this and give me a graph of that, and then send copies of it to everybody on team A, and all the software developers in the West are going crazy over these capabilities for using agentic AI flows on their own computers now. But unbeknownst even to them, I would say, I'd heard about this on X because I follow a lot of Chinese related stuff, but even most of these advanced AI users in the West don't realize that there's literally a phone in China that has that kind of agentic integration already. So talk about your phone.
Yeah, I mean, I've had it for a few months now. It truly feels like the first smartphone because it has complete control. Now, there are some apps that have since banned its use.
Right. So WeChat immediately just banned.
I think, within 12 hours. Yeah. It knows, it plays nice. It knows, do not go on WeChat. Also, like you get signed out from some of these apps, these Chinese apps, if it knows that it can detect it very easily. But the apps that it hasn't, it's amazing. And all of the apps in the West, because I can have Google Play Store on.
Yeah, I know. So you have X there.
Yeah. So if I can have this just post on X all day if I wanted to.
So you could go to the Doubao agent and you could say, you know what, this Iran war thing is big. Write 3 posts a day on what's happening with missile defense in Israel, how many hits the Iranians are getting in Tel Aviv. And it would just do that for you.
Yeah.
And it's posting on X, and X doesn't, being this like, Western company that's not aware this is going on. They don't realize like, anybody with a phone like this can just have their agent posting on X for them.
Yeah. And there aren't many of these phones out there. So that's partially why as well. But like, here's a real example. I really want to go skiing in Xinjiang this year. I go every year. And I want to monitor when there's a big storm coming. But since this is in such a remote part of China, there aren't the same weather stations that you would have at, let's say, Vale. So it's actually kind of word of mouth and on social media. So this prompt is in Chinese, but I have this run at 10 a.m. every morning, but I'll just run it right now. What it's doing is, well, first of all, it's deciding how to approach this, but it often will go on the Chinese TikTok Douyin, and it will watch videos and read the comments. And we can check in with it here of what people are saying.
So Douyin, for people who don't know, is the YouTube of China. And this thing the agent that he's empowering here will watch the video, read the comments.
So now actually we can see it has gone in. So it knows what to search. And it's funny when you have these repetitive tasks because every time is different. And so it's going in, it's saying the most recent videos. Let's see. But again, it will actually watch the content of the video and read the comments.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny watching it. Yeah, it's already in the comments. So, but it is clicking on my phone right now.
Right.
Which is pretty wild to watch it. But it's also really helpful actually for me to use Chinese apps that I wouldn't otherwise know how to use these functions. So I posted a video on Twitter right when I got it. My friends know how to schedule someone to stand in line for you. And they do it, at these popular restaurants or things. But I don't know how to do that. I don't even know what app to get. So I just asked it to do that. And it downloads the app.
And you can ask it in English.
You can ask it in English. It's great in English. And it downloaded the app and then made an account for me. And then it figured out how to do it. And I mean, you can watch it on Twitter. And it's so fast. It does have the most advanced chip, 16 gigs of RAM, Qualcomm Snapdragon. The only other phone that it's in is the flagship Xiaomi that just launched. I mean, a lot is happening on device and in the cloud. But just seeing it all come together, it's ahead of its time for sure. And the reason that some of these apps have banned it, as you can probably imagine, among other reasons, is there are ads that are going to, like right now, it's scrolling on Chinese TikTok. There will be an ad. Well, that wasn't human eyes that saw that. And so that's not really fair to the advertiser. So this is kind of, a bigger question. But yeah, the apps that have not banned it it's very fun to use. But this kind of thing in Shenzhen, there are 3 other, basically every smartphone company that is not called Samsung, LG, and Apple, and Google, they're all in Shenzhen. And Xiaomi technically is not in Shenzhen. But other than that, Oppo, Vivo, Huawei, ZTE, they're all here. And so there are multiple companies working on this, and they will be launched this year. And that's something that, again, in the West, we just won't have.
Yeah, you're gonna be visiting your cousin in South Africa or Nigeria. They're gonna have a better phone than you because they're not.
Yeah, I don't know how much travel you've done around Southeast Asia in like the last year, but it is like in Sri Lanka when there are better cars. Because they're all Chinese. There are more advanced cars on the road there. Than in America. That is wild.
Well, it's already true in Mexico, so you can buy a BYD in Mexico,
right?
So
and so, but all of these emerging countries, they now have, like most of them already, you see BYDs there. You see, and they all know these Chinese phones, and they can just do more. They're more capable now.
I mean, you talk to a European, and they're familiar with Xiaomi and all these brands. Americans don't even know the names. They don't even know the names of these brands.
It's a wild time, and especially we have access to all the information in the world, and you can also translate all of these things. And it's weird that these people just choose not to address what is happening here. And it's the most advanced things. These are the technologies that are making people's lives better, and they just choose to ignore it. It's a wild time.
Coming from Silicon Valley right now, or SF right now, people are so obsessed with the AI race and, Anthropic versus OpenAI and stuff. Doubao is not a model that people think about very much, even though, people who know their stuff know ByteDance can do stuff. And so it's kind of amazing that maybe this is the first instance of having these kinds of agentic flows on a phone, and it's Doubao that's powering it.
And we're going to have this in cars soon. We're going to have this on computers. And the other thing is, as we're watching it scroll through, we can have it run in the background. And I can just tap in to watch what it's doing. I can use the phone for other things. I can lock the phone. But it is fun to watch it sometimes. And you kind of forget about it. And so, I mean, this already exists. And we're also seeing, again, they did not need the government's approval to do this. And yes, it technically is still a prototype, but we will have phones that have this. And they'll just be common. Already, if you go to any office in China, you would be shocked. Well, maybe you wouldn't be, but a lot of people will be shocked by how much AI is already in the office, in all kinds of offices. And these are from companies they don't really think of. Like Baidu is huge for this. And everyone is using Doubao. Everyone is just the average citizen. I think in the US, it's like what, 10% of people use AI on a daily basis?
Well, I don't know that number, but I think a lot of people use it a little bit, at least a little bit.
Among, I think younger generation, but as a population as a whole, it's not that much. Here, it is far more people are using it. And I will say they're better at using it. Like some of my non-techie friends here, they have OpenClaw running on their computer. They went in, and bought a Mac Mini. So that's just, they're better users, I would say.
Now, the thing people are all afraid of with OpenClaw is that if you give it access to all your socials and your email and stuff, that, you know, it's a huge security risk. And with this one, I guess, okay, it's still in prototype, right? But you're not, this thing has not been ordering things off the internet.
It's never done anything that I don't want. Yeah, I did catch it the other day watching. It was supposed to actually be doing this prompt, watching skiing videos, and it was scrolling through like pretty girls, and that it was. I don't know why it was doing that.
Yeah,
that was the only surprising kind of thing. No, I mean with my information, like I want this to have my passport number. I want it to have my address. So when I book a ticket, it automatically puts all that stuff in.
Yeah.
So you can tap in to see its memory.
And I think you said this one's engineered so that if it's about to actually make a transaction where there's money transferred, it does check. Yeah, it checks with you, right? So
and it's never skipped that.
Yeah.
It is passing CAPTCHAs, which is interesting. But because I think they're evolving so much that it has maybe in its training never seen these.
Yeah.
So it likes to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like another example was I had it play Wordle. Now, I don't think Wordle is that big in this country.
Yeah.
But so it probably was the first time it ever saw it. And it at the first word, it was horrible.
Right.
And then it learned. So I watched it learn the game in real time. That was fascinating. But yeah, these kinds of things are just it's inevitable. And it's a matter of what apps and companies embrace it and which ones completely block it. And the reason that Tencent blocked it so early on is because they're developing the same thing.
Yeah.
So of course they don't want them having this.
So, back in the States, I won't go all the way to the existential risk doomers, but there's a growing feeling, especially among younger people, that, this kind of AI automation is going to limit their job prospects. And I'm wondering, do you detect a different view of that discourse in China? Like, are people here also worried about how young people are going to find work if AIs are this capable?
It's a great question. I've been thinking about it a lot because 2026, I think, will mark that year that this starts happening. They're really, truly, people are directly losing their jobs to AI. One is it's very, very difficult to fire people in this country. Very difficult. Most people...
What is this, a communist country?
Most people will work for the same company out of college or their highest level of education their whole lives, and they'll retire there. In tech, there's more switching around, but not so much. So that reason alone protects a lot of people. They're also, as I said, they're better at implementing AI. And so let's say that your job in China before AI was to make a presentation for your boss every week. And you would spend that whole week putting together that presentation. Now AI can do a pretty good job, and next year it'll do a very good job, and maybe the year after it'll do way better than you ever could with formatting, with everything. Yeah. And so now you can crank out, in China they see it as you can crank out now 7 decks, 7 presentations every week for me. Whereas in the US, I think it's easier to justify, well, we don't need that person anymore. Yeah. So yeah, the implementation, people are just becoming like super soldiers here.
But you're not getting the vibe of fear and loathing and worrying about the whole generation that's coming up.
No.
Okay. Because that's very big in the US.
I know. And I feel that in the US. There's job protection. And I will say that the government has the ability to, if it got that bad, where we're really like, there are only a few jobs left for humans, they will probably implement that better than restrict some of these things. But it's just a kind of society that's not the way that they operate. So of course there are a lot of unknowns, but in the near term, I'm just seeing more corporate embracing of AI, and there are way better applications for this than exist in the West. And so it's just people are adapting much better here. And I mean, even, it's the same kind of question about, like, we can look out the window and see drone delivery. You can see it pass between these two buildings. That used to, yes, now the drones are doing something that normal workers used to do here. But you still have people running the orders to drone, where they take off, and then returning the boxes that are recyclable. Like, there's still jobs created, but also just don't even get to that point. 5 years ago, the people whose jobs we're talking about being displaced this industry did not exist.
Right.
So like it's you just need to adapt. So
people are used to more dynamism here.
yeah, and also the Chinese kind of have this, especially in Shenzhen, this innovate or die approach, and that is true among jobs. So you're probably not going to see so many freelance artists in China than you are in some other societies, and that's just part of the society here. So they're more efficient in how they deploy themselves and embrace and work with AI.
One of the things that I right before I came here, I was in Singapore, or actually, to be very precise, I was on a little island off the coast of Singapore, which is actually part of Malaysia. But there's what used to be a kind of ghost city development there, and Balaji Srinivasan has built this thing called Network School there, and it's become like a place for digital nomads and startup founders to go and like dial in and work on their startup. But very interesting international group of people there. And one of the things I think I blew their mind with in discussing the topic that we've just been covering is I said to them, in the US, it's very possible that the AI company, when OpenAI goes IPO and Anthropic goes IPO, they're going to create all these billionaires. And it might be that a relatively small set of people who really own the IP and the technology behind AI will capture, increasingly large chunks of the total amount of wealth in society. And because in the US, rich oligarchs basically control the government, they'll be allowed to keep that. Whereas in China, you could imagine a situation where they develop equally formidable AI, but those AIs are not, people who, quote, own those AIs are not able to capture all the wealth in society because the government will force some level of distribution. So even if like there are fewer jobs for 18-year-olds, the 18-year-olds still may get a bunch of benefits from the state since it is a socialistic country, right? And maybe if you're worried about human thriving, you should be rooting for a socialist government to actually win the AI race. Because otherwise, like the AIs will eat us and there's no government to protect us from that. Right?
Yeah, it's a great point, and probably partially why they're so keen for open source.
I think part of that is just the competitive landscape between US and China. I mean, I think that mainly drove it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see in the long run if AI becomes, it starts to displace human AI plus robots, starts to displace a lot of human labor, like how the gains from all of that productivity are just redistributed in society. That's going to be a key question. I mean, Sam Altman does favor UBI, right? So, so at least there's that, but it's not even clear the government would do UBI in the United States, right? So,
yeah. And the OpenAI has changed its form.
Yeah.
So who knows what he'll think later.
Yeah. So let's talk about your fund, Snowbull Capital. You have unique insights into what's happening here in China. So I think you have a better feel maybe for what's happening with the publicly listed companies as well as private companies here. One of the things we were just talking about is helping investors get access to stakes in companies that are still private. So there are a number of really formidable companies here like BYD and ByteDance that are just private. And there's no, as far as I know, it's quite difficult to get any exposure in your portfolio.
BYD is public.
Oh, so not, I didn't, oh, did I say
DJI? I think
DJI. I meant DJI, sorry. Yeah. So talk about what your new fund and what that's meant to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very complex for the US side, actually.
Yeah.
The goal eventually is, and hopefully very soon, is to have a fund, have a way for American LPs all over the world, including in China, to invest in China's leading private companies. And you'll never be able to invest in Huawei because that's all employee owned, but pretty much every other kind, DeepSeek as well, but pretty much every other company, there is a secondary market. And right now there's no way for pretty much foreigners, but especially Americans, to have access. And so we've been looking at ways that we can get that exposure. And I think we're very close to an answer to that. And it will, I also actually see it as philosophically as a bridge between the two countries, because this whole time Chinese have theoretically been able to invest in the leading AI companies or tech companies in the US and other countries, but it's not the other way around. And there are many reasons for that. But now there is actually surprisingly a lot of demand from American, elite to they hear about China. They want to, at least diversify it a bit.
Yep.
And so these private companies, I mean, a lot of them are staying, like ByteDance and DJI specifically, are staying private so they can just become huge. And some are even, wondering if like DJI will ever go public. So they're going to remain private for a long time. And some of these earlier companies that are, startup scene here is only starting, I would say, in these really exciting areas, in the exact exciting areas that they are in the US. So yeah, I mean, eventually, there was a conversation that a few years ago that maybe Americans can never have access to these private Chinese companies, but we found ways that we can have exposure. So yeah, we're really excited about it. We'll announce more when we formalize it. But yeah, that's always been the goal. And I think bridging the two countries, especially right now, it's very important. I think more students need to come here. I think more just open-minded people, when they see it, they will realize that they're being lied to, first of all. And, and also just there should be something about humanity where a certain type of human likes to see the most advanced things that humans have put together.
Yep.
And that is happening here. And so, yeah, for the sake of humanity, there should be more bridges connecting to China. And then I will say, we are starting to really see that happen. Not really from Americans, though, but from other countries.
Yeah, I think Europeans maybe are more open to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Coming back to this stakes in private companies, privately held companies. So in the US, for most startups, there's pretty healthy secondary market where if your shares are vested, you can sell them potentially, or maybe, I mean, it depends on the company, of course, what terms govern, your shares. But to some extent, there's some way for people who have vested shares in private companies to get some liquidity out of it. And there are investors who in those secondary markets really want to own those stakes. And I guess here it's not yet a thing, right? Is that true? So if I were a vested DJI employee and I want to get some liquidity, I don't have particularly good ways. Can I borrow against my shares from a bank?
Yes, you can, a certain percentage. A few different reasons why this happens. One is probably the most important, is that a lot of companies in China, it's not as common for them to issue shares to their employees. They'll just pay them higher and higher salaries. And so there's less of a market for that reason. Also, some companies they're more restrictive. See, as it is, the shares in the company give you more power, and they don't want to lose too much power. So they also see the business model that Huawei has been so successful with doing. I mean, if you ask a student right now on the street in this city, maybe they're biased, but what company do they want to work for when they grow up? Many of them will say Huawei. And they know that Huawei has probably more millionaires than any other company in this country. So they see that as a successful structure.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I would guess almost no Americans, very, very few, understand the ownership structure of Huawei. And I even remember, I was watching a documentary about Huawei on YouTube. I don't think it got a lot of distribution in the US, but they went to extreme lengths to go into these vaults at Huawei where the lists of all the employees are. Yeah, the ledger of who owns the shares. Just to I felt like the documentary filmmaker and the internal Huawei folks wanted to really prove to the outside world that no, our company really does work this way. Our company is not just an arm of the Communist Party of China, right? So maybe just explain to a normie American who doesn't even know what the ownership structure, the financial structure of Huawei is. How does it work?
Yeah, so it's completely employee owned, and they basically, the more senior you get, the more shares you get. And there are a lot of Huawei people who were just early employees, and Ren Zhengfei, the founder, he's always believed in this. And so from the beginning,
PLA Ron Zhengfei.
Oh, right, of course. Yes,
you have to say he was once an officer in the PLA.
Yeah, and he worked behind a desk because of bad eyesight. But yeah, so I will say actually, Huawei structure within the company is kind of like the military. And it's one of these things, just they call each other comrades and everything. And it's quite silly. I think that maybe there was at some point some conversation with, US intelligence And they heard of someone who knew how Huawei was structured, and they said it's structured internally like the military. And then they thought it was a military company.
Right.
But no, yeah, it's completely employee owned, and it's again a huge draw, huge incentive for people to work at Huawei. And basically, if you work at Huawei, you do not leave unless you are starting something that is going to make more money. And I have some friends who I can't believe that they left, and probably their families can't either, but they're really betting on themselves. And I think kind of the same thing is happening with DJI employees, just at complete opposite ends of the age range. So DJI employees, they're some of the best students. The best students right now in China are going to DJI. And they, by the time they're 30 years old, I mean, some of them have been working there since they were literally even 17 years old. They now they've amassed a lot of money, and they get together and they are forming, these are companies that I think probably every listener has in their home. And some of these home robot vacuum cleaners and pool cleaners, like robots that play tennis against you. These are all young DJI guys. And the thing is, it's very hard even for me to track this on the private side, because they are not fundraising beyond just their own bank accounts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, these are truly some of the smartest people. At the other end, you have Huawei guys who are in their 50s who have amassed a ton of money, and they want to sell, they think they can sell amazing products. I've got one friend who's quit his job at Huawei and is selling actually, PhD from Tsinghua. He's selling a pet hair remover. Okay. And he's targeting the US market on Amazon. And I mean, he's a genius. It's probably going to be the best pet hair remover you've ever seen. But when they believe in something, they can just do it. And so that's the kind of risk I'm talking about. But beyond that, it's the same. Like, you would be a fool to quit your job at DJI right now. Same thing at ByteDance. Same thing at these leading companies. Whereas there's less job security. Well, there's job security, but there's less upward mobility at a company like maybe BYD or even maybe Xiaomi.
But just coming back to the unique structure of Huawei, so the company's completely owned by employees. There's no outside investment that comes in. When the company has a good year, I think last year they had a good year, are they redistributing those profits to the employees?
Yeah. They pay very handsome dividends.
Yeah.
And especially recently, they've been doing super well. So it's actually becoming such an issue that they're paying them too well and they're retiring too early.
Yes.
So, but still, I don't think they're going to change that. It's, people see maybe ZTE or BYD as stepping stones
to get a job. Yeah. See, what I find really interesting about the ownership structure of Huawei is that you could find people who label themselves like 100% free market capitalists who would look at the structure of that company and go like, yeah, that's the ideal company. There's nothing wrong with that company, right? That it's got the right incentive structure. The employees actually benefit from success of the company. Nothing wrong with that. And you would even have some like kind of socialist left-wingers who are against corporations. But when they look at the structure of Huawei, they go, well, if we have to have corporations, that's how it should work.
That's a good structure.
They should be owned by it's like a co-op. It's like the food co-op, in Brooklyn or something. So I find that it really interesting that this is, some people would say it's the most formidable technology company in the world. I mean, they completely rule 5G, 6G networking, and they're involved in manufacturing semiconductors and making phones and AI.
Cars?
Yeah, maybe not. They're not so good at AI right now, but maybe there are other companies that are better at AI. But still, it's one of the most impressive tech companies in the world. But it's got this very unique structure. I can't think of any other really prominent company that has a structure like this.
No, it's very unique, and also they make the software for a lot of cars. Some of the coolest cars are co-produced by Huawei, and they make the best autonomous driving system in the world. So, yeah, I mean, they're the company to beat. I will say internally, pretty much every tech company in China that is not Huawei hates Huawei.
Oh, really?
Oh, they hate them so much.
Because they're
so
tough
powerful.
to compete against.
So cool.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, they're envious of their structure. And, also, I think tying into what we were talking about earlier, their structure also is one of the explanations for why they act like they did when Gina Raimondo was here with May 60. And they personally feel attacked when the US attacks them. And so, yeah, they lash out. And also, if you go to Huawei press, product release, you will see the teams who are involved in each, product that's being unveiled they do it in these sports stadiums and they fill every seat. And they will be chanting these slogans. And if you didn't speak Chinese, you would kind of think it is the military, because they treat these projects like they're, in the military. So yeah, it's very unique company. I think this is maybe why the US fears them so much. It's because they can't do anything except just spew propaganda that the government owns them.
There's so many things mixed up in this because, one of the ways that the US has controlled Europe, and again, this makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but if you just look at the Snowden leaks, it's pretty clear. Snowden revealed that Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, her cell phone had been monitored for, I think, over a decade by US NSA and CIA. And if I'm able to monitor the cell phone of major European leaders, up and coming politicians are already at the top, and all these people, maybe not all of them, but a pretty good chunk of them are up to things that they're embarrassed about. They might be sleeping with their aide. They might be having an affair. They might be taking a bribe. Very likely that because they're not trained spies, what they're doing is picked up by their phone. And so it's very easy for the US to control these people. The more naive thing is to say the US just knows what the top leadership in France is thinking because we have access to their cell phones. But much stronger than that is the ability to just blackmail a particular French politician. Hey, I know you're cheating on your wife and the girl you slept with is only 14. We don't want this to get out, And the way the meeting would actually happen is some CIA person who is actually official title is they're at the embassy or something. They're at the State Department, but they're actually CIA. They might have a meeting with this politician and say, I'm here to warn you, that we noticed the Russians or the Chinese have been trying to hack your phone. And they did get some access to your phone, and seems to be what they learned.
Interesting.
And then they say, this should not get out. And we want to assure you that, first of all, we're going to take some steps to protect you, but you should protect yourself. But then after that guy, of course, is what? People know X is true about me. And then if we need a favor from that guy, you just say, hey, I'd like this favor. And, we protected you against this stuff. Protected. I'm using air quotes, right? So that's a very common thing in espionage circles. Now, when Huawei comes along and says, oh, we have better 5G technology. You can build your whole national data network using our technology. It has no backdoors for NSA or CIA. Maybe it has backdoors for the Chinese side. Okay. But that is such a threat to the American spook way of doing business that they will do everything they can to kill Huawei, which is literally the history of what they've tried to do to Huawei for the last, literally gone to the British government. I'll tell you stories because my friend Dominic Cummings was the special advisor to Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson was in power. And around that time, GCHQ, which is their NSA, had done a whole review. And they said, well, we don't want our core routers to be Huawei, but some edge router that's just on some city block, and it's just processing the cell phone calls from, within a block of where we put the little thing. That's okay to be Huawei because it's on the edge. So GCHQ did a very thorough technical review of Huawei technology and said it can be used in these ways, but not in these other ways. End of story. And very competent group of people there. So that was the British position, but the US didn't like that position. And I believe I've been told from sources that were actually there that I think it was Pompeo. I can't remember exactly which person it was, but it might have been Pompeo, literally went to number 10, camped out in an office, had to have meetings with the top officials, and just started yelling, at these people F-bombs. And so no, you will not install any, we will fuck you. We will kill you guys if you do this. And so eventually the British government just reversed their position on this. But it was not because some technical argument, no, your GCHQ report was wrong. You shouldn't do it this way. Here, let me show you some internal documents about Huawei technology where, no, it was literally just 100% bully tactics. And then they kicked Huawei, or they at least set in motion the policies to kick Huawei out of their system. So,
and remember, they years ago, the Europeans forced Huawei to pay for their own third-party independent review
Correct.
organization in Europe and test everything.
Right.
And they, to my knowledge, have never found
Right.
any of these.
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
I think the Australians also pushed back.
Yeah.
I remember.
I'm not saying that Huawei is better than U.S. telco providers that do put in backdoors for CIA and NSA. Maybe Huawei is more or less equivalent. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but the point is a lot of the hostility of the U.S. deep state and NatSec establishment against Huawei is literally because they are doing this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't want anyone stopping them from being able to do this stuff.
Exactly.
So-
And so, like, all party members in China, they are not allowed to use iPhone.
Which is totally reasonable. Like,
of course.
People in the U.S. interpreted this as like, oh, well, they're trying to support their national champion, Huawei, and they just want to damage Apple. But it's like, no, if I were running a country, if I were running Iran and like, oh, you guys might try to assassinate my top leadership, yeah, I'm going to ban iPhones.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, Huawei will have white papers on their privacy.
Right.
And Apple will have commercials on
Right.
theirs.
Right.
That's the difference. And
Right.
people think that just because the FBI can't crack the password to some school shooter's iPhone, that means that it's super secure.
Right.
Absolutely not. They could crack it
Right.
so easily, and they do every day. So yeah, I mean, Huawei is, most government officials use a Huawei phone. And I mean, trust me, I've been in meetings where they were bad mouthing Huawei. Most of the phones in there were Huawei. If they thought that Huawei were listening, they would leave their phones outside.
Yeah.
And some companies do just, the policy to leave all their phones outside. But trust me, I've been in plenty of meetings where if Huawei were listening, it would be bad for them. So no, I mean, Huawei is super secure in the Chinese mind. And so you kind of have to trust that it's pretty secure. Yeah. Fascinating company.
Yeah.
Totally misunderstood by the rest of the world.
Incredible. So we've been talking, I think it's a little over an hour now. Maybe we can start wrapping up. I think we're both boosters for Americans when they come to China to visit this city in particular. For someone who doesn't have the kind of connections that you have, when they come to Shenzhen, what should they do? What's something that average person can see that will really impress upon them the enormity of what's going on here?
Unless someone, really high power wants to see something specific, no matter who you are, I actually have the same answer. You need to see how technology is embraced by the average person here, because it is no exaggeration. If I were to tweet a video of, some really crazy series of high tech things in someone's life here, it wouldn't be believable. Maybe I just captured one edge case. That's just not the case, though. This city is so nerdy. It is so techy. And so what I recommend is people to stay in Nanshan, the district we are now. There's a park called Talent Park. And I think it's just a good way to see everything at once. You can see brand new infrastructure, the newest mall in the country, definitely the best mall in the world. Just opened a few months ago.
We're going to have dinner there tonight?
Probably, yeah. I'm not kidding, yeah. You can see and experience drone delivery. You can see all of the robo-taxis surrounding the park. It's also a beautiful park. And you can see the skyline similar to this view where we have now. And you can just listen and you can hear how silent the roads are. And there's actually a store, the world's first ever Kickstarter physical store just opened. It's called Inno100. And that's a good collection of all of, and I'll take you there later, of all of Shenzhen's latest products, many of which you can buy in the US and some of which you can't just because the government banned them. But it's just kind of the best of the best stuff. And it's like a sharper image, but like Shenzhenified. So I think that kind of series in an afternoon is a really good way to see the genuine high-tech aspects of the city. And also some of these, Shenzhen is kind of known for malls, especially in the summer. It's so hot. You don't want to be outside that much. So you go to malls, and the malls here are just on another level. But many of these malls also have car dealership showrooms. And so you can actually get a good sense of the latest cars by just going to pretty much any random mall. And also just driving around the city, you can see a lot. You can see how every single taxi is electric. Most of the plates, they're either green or blue. They're green if they're EVs. Most of the plates now are green. So you don't have to be a car expert to know if that car is electric.
Right.
The plate. So yeah, I mean, but now like you just drive around, walk around wherever your hotel is, just walk around that neighborhood. You'll see what people, say is the real China. You'll see the real Shenzhen, and you'll see kids on, electric, scooters fighting each other with, digital, guns. And, they're just super nerds. And it's an awesome city. People critique it for not having culture because it's so new. That is Shenzhen's culture. It's just so high tech. And I think my favorite part of the city is that if something is overly done when it comes to technology, it won't make it out of this city. So you do see some stuff that you shake your head at that because it's too Shenzhen.
Yeah.
It's never leaving here. And just seeing that stuff, it's people's attempts because they never know what's going to stick. And so just watching, technology, basically walking prototypes everywhere you look.
Now, Doubao on your ZTE phone, that is going to leave Shenzhen, right? You think that's something that's going to be on every phone within a few
My friends
years?
at ByteDance say that they expect to ship this overseas.
Yeah.
So
incredible.
Yeah. And again, in English and many languages.
We won't get it in the US though.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Everyone in the UK will have it, and Germany and Dubai, but we won't have it.
Like many other things.
All right, Taylor, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for being on Manifold.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming out.